Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. This video is about the possibility of the Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg becoming Prime Minister. I remember several years ago there was an article about him, shortly after he was elected to Parliament, him as a cult conservative. And he's got more of a personal following than any other backbencher, more of a personal following than the Liberal Democrat leader. What's his name again? Sir Vince, you know. So, Rees-Mogg, he's inspired some new words, the neologisms Jacobite, as an allusion to Jacobite, because he seems to be an 18th century reactionary, I suppose. Catholicism, divine right of kings, why not? Or indeed Mogalomaniac, but I'm very proud of that latter one. That's my invention. So who is he? Well, this man, he was born in 1969, son of William Rees-Mogg, sometime editor of the Times, Lord Rees-Mogg, who has since been called to the gate of St. Peter. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, he went to Eton and then Trinity College, Oxford, where he read history, and he's a very historically minded chap. He's always alluding to things that happened in centuries of yore. He went into investments and he worked in Hong Kong for a while. So he was a conservative since as soon as he could crawl. Yeah, Tory to the backbone, every inch of him. His father launched a legal challenge to the Treaty of Maastricht, which was signed in 1992. And that was the treaty which created the European Union. Up until then, it was the European Community, or indeed the European Economic Community. Anyway, Maastricht in the Netherlands is where 12 countries signed this, created the EU. Now there are 28 EU countries for the moment, about to be down to 27. So the Honourable Rees-Mogg, he tried to be elected to Parliament several times, most notably in 1997 for a no-hoper seat in Scotland, and there are these apocryphal tales of him being chauffeur-driven in his Bentley around Sink Estates. Now, I know it's a very visually arresting image. I suspect it's not quite true. Haranguing the great unwashed through his megaphone, no doubt. He had a nanny well into his 30s, all the rest of it. It's just hilarious. So he's married, he's got several children. He's converted to Roman Catholicism, a well-trodden path for young fogies. He was always a young man hurrying to be an old man. Now, he has never had the supreme accolade of making my acquaintance, but I know enough people who have met him who say that he is completely genuine. Since his school days, he's always the same. So this is not an affectation. This is his character through and through. He disapproves of dissipation, but I wouldn't say he's a joyless or curmudgeonly conservative. But he's like something from a bygone era. He might have stepped from the pages of Bertie Wooster, or indeed Brideshead Revisited. I shouldn't wonder if he had a teddy bear called Aloysius, whom he takes to bars, buys drinks, and spanks with his brush. But the Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg is best known for being an outspoken Brexiteer, and he's been vociferous in this cause from day one. And he's been one of those Tory faithful who said, nope, do not vote for the Kippers, stay with the Conservative and Unionist Party, we'll get you what you want. So he wants a hard Brexit. That is to say, he wants the United Kingdom to leave without any agreement with the European Union. Doesn't seem to have wished to even achieve an agreement, but the red lines he set were all but unobtainable. And he has been supporting this challenge against the Prime Minister. He wants to see Theresa May booted out, or Mrs May as he'd always call her. Remember, they need 48 signatures from Conservative members of Parliament to trigger a leadership election. So far, only 25 have declared. Now, there may be some more stealthy toves who have signed these letters calling for Mrs May to be defenestrated, but have not gone public with it. So Nadine Norris says they're close to that number. She's a very different sort of conservative, a Liverpudlian conservative who was a nurse, and she says she's very working class, all the rest of it, but very authentic and appeals to a different sort of people from Rees-Mogg, who's something like, you know, almost like your stage Tory and or stage Englishman. But the Honourable Rees-Mogg is a very strong admirer of the late Baroness Thatcher of Kesteven of happy and glorious memory. But is May's tenacity and resilience not redolent of the Iron Lady herself? Anyway, so imagine the scenario that Theresa May faces the leadership challenge, she probably can't take it anymore, and she just resigns, or indeed she loses. There aren't really obvious people to take over her. On the Remain side, No one says they're trying to take over from her, interestingly. But that could all change very rapidly. But Rees-Mogg, he's been spoken of as a possible leader of the Conservative Party for a few years now, which he claimed to see as hilarious, just silly season August stuff when it's a slow news weekend and Parliament's in recess. But what are his allurements? Well, eccentricity, sincerity, courtesy. He's got this old world decency to him. Minister for the 18th century, he's been called. But I suspect he has a limited appeal, partly because of his aureation. I remember seeing a interview with him, and he was asked about this whole Brexit kerfuffle, and he said, "Vanitas, vanitatum, omnia vanitas." I probably misquoted it. It's from Ecclesiastes. Now, the Honourable Rees-Mogg doesn't seem to realise that most people never studied Latin, not for a single lesson, and even if he'd quoted in English, most people would not have recognised the biblical allusion. So that's why he's too stilted in his conversation. And as I say, that is him being real. That's who he is. But again, that he really doesn't have the common touch. That doesn't connect with the ordinary person whose lives I don't think he understands or even particularly tries to. He's a multimillionaire. Well done to him. But the opulence that he lives in and his just old world style doesn't seem to be very relevant to modern Britain. He's like a throwback to the Edwardian age in his sartorial style, as well as his mannerisms. He's got this ducal demeanour to him. He speaks in this languid, fruity voice. He's always immaculately turned out, so you can't fault him for that. But I really don't think he's got a great deal of credibility. You can see how he can be mercilessly lampooned by Labour and others. Is this what you really want? Someone from the big house, someone from the grouse moors, lording it over you yet again. And because he's not actually from an aristocratic family, perhaps he tries all the harder to burnish his posh credentials. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's a hilarious prospect. He's not as theatrical as Bojo. He's maybe not as humorous as Bojo. He's a lot more genuine than Bojo. And we're not hearing so much about Bojo anymore. These two men are allies. They were not quite at school together because Bojo would have left about the year that the Honourable Rees-Mogg arrived. Notably, when Ali G wanted to interview a Tory boy to kind of ridicule the whole concept, of all the people he could have chosen, and this is almost 20 years ago, he chose the Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg. The late 90s, when the Conservative and Unionist Party was in the absolute doldrums, people talking about it not only being not the main opposition party, not even the third party, it just wasn't even going to exist, was going to be annihilated. And Rees-Mogg was one of those who stayed with the Conservative and Unionist Party. Well, really, there was nowhere else for him to go. I suppose he's such an odd bod and such a reactionary that one could have thought he would join the UK Independence Party, but it wasn't to be. So the Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg, I really don't think so, because, the hard-line Brexiteers are only about 50 members of Parliament. Not all of whom would vote for him. They probably see him as an electoral liability, that he would lead the party to calamity. So I really don't think it's going to happen. And good entertainment value though he is, I think that we'll have to keep him as part of this fascinating Tory menagerie and not see him as First Lord of the Treasury, the typically antiquated title which I'm sure he would favour.